I couldn't sleep that night. Even with the map folded and tucked away in the next room, I kept seeing it in my head. The broken circle, the faded ink, that one strange phrase looping endlessly in my thoughts, where water whispers and stone remembers. It didn't feel like a mystery to be solved. It felt like something was reaching out, something waiting, and somehow I'd agreed to meet it. By morning, the decision was made without ever really being made. I packed a bag, flashlight, compass, a few granola bars, a canteen, notebook, and the map. I left my phone behind on purpose. I told myself it was because there would be no signal anyway, but that wasn't the reason. Something about this didn't want to be tracked. I drove north for 6 hours, through long-forgotten highways and stretches of nowhere. The gas stations became fewer, the town smaller, the signs more rust than lettering. Eventually, even the static on the radio gave up, and when the trees finally thickened into an uninterrupted wall of pine and shadow, I pulled over and turned the engine off. There was a gravel path to the right of the road, unmarked, unpaved, barely visible through the moss and years. I left the car there. From this point on, I was walking. My boots sank slightly into the soft ground, the scent of damp earth and old wood immediately wrapping around me like a warning. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just silence, heavy and listening. I tried to shake it off. Forests could be quiet, but this was different. The silence wasn't passive. It felt like it was waiting to hear something from me first. I followed the contours of the map, matching hills to sketches, streams to lines. And eventually, after nearly an hour of hiking through terrain that didn't seem to want me there, I heard water. Not rushing, not bubbling, just movement. A steady trickle, too constant to be natural. I turned toward it. There was a clearing ahead, sunless and wide. The stream cut straight through it like a scar. On the far side, half buried in the hill, was the arch. It wasn't grand or decorative. It was just stone, dark, weathered, moss-covered, but it radiated presence, like it had been there before the forest ever grew around it. The shape was unmistakable, the same broken circle silhouette from the map. And at its base, black water flowed quietly into the dark. I stood there for several minutes, just staring. The air felt heavier now, like each breath had to be pulled through something thick. I approached slowly, step by step, until I was right in front of it. Up close, I could see faint carvings in the stone. Symbols, not letters, not any language I recognized. They didn't look etched by hand, more like grown into the rock itself. I reached out without thinking, placing my fingers on the center of the arch. It was warm, not sun-warmed, internally warm, as if the stone had a heartbeat. I ducked beneath the arch and stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The stream continued through the tunnel, but it was narrower now, guiding me forward like a trail. The walls pressed close on either side. The ceiling arched just above my head. And that silence from the woods? It had followed me in. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it. It stayed on, but the shadows danced more than they should have. I kept walking. The sound of my boots on stone was too soft, like the tunnel was absorbing noise. A few steps later, the air changed again. Denser, sharper, like I was walking through memory, not atmosphere. Then the symbols began to glow. Faint at first, just a shimmer. Then stronger, not like neon or fire, but like reflected light from some other place. They pulsed, slowly, in rhythm with something I couldn't feel, but somehow recognized. It was like the tunnel was alive, and it was remembering me. I stopped, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, not in my ear, inside my head. It wasn't words. It was knowing. And that knowing pressed against my skull like fingers tapping from the inside. I wanted to run, but I didn't. I kept walking, because a part of me, the part that had opened that map, the part that had packed the bag, the part that had driven into this forgotten nowhere, needed to know what was waiting on the other side. The tunnel narrowed again. The light from the entrance had long disappeared behind me. I didn't look back. Somehow, I knew I couldn't. And then, after what felt like both 5 minutes and a full day, I saw the end. A pale light. Gray, not white. As I stepped through the last stretch of tunnel, I came out not into the forest I'd left, but into something else. It looked like a forest. The trees were there. The ground was damp. The air still. But everything was wrong. The colors muted. The sky overcast, though there were no clouds. The light came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It wasn't day. It wasn't night. I turned back. The tunnel was gone. Behind me, just more trees. I should have panicked. I should have screamed. But I didn't. Because just ahead, at the edge of the tree lean, there was someone standing. Not moving. Not approaching. Just watching. I don't know how long I stood there. I don't remember blinking. But when I looked again, they were gone. And all that remained was the whisper. You're not the first. The map didn't show where the gate led. Only that it existed. And now, so do I. The silence was different here. Not just quiet, expectant. Like the trees were waiting for me to speak first. Like they knew my name, but were too polite to say it out loud. I took a few careful steps forward. The ground was soft, but not muddy. It had the texture of something walked on too many times by feet that never left tracks. The air was thicker now, like breathing through gauze. The more I walked, the less sure I became that I was walking at all. My steps had weight, but the ground didn't respond. No crunch of leaves. No shift of soil. I turned my head. There were no sounds. No wind. No birds. Not even my own heartbeat. It was like my senses were being reprogrammed in real time. After maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, I saw something new. Carvings in bark. Not just one tree, but many. Dozens. All different symbols. Spirals. Forks. Eye shapes. Lines that curved in ways geometry shouldn't allow. And they weren't carved recently. These weren't fresh. The bark had grown around them, healed over them, as if the trees had been marked 100 years ago and had learned to live with it. I reached out to touch one. The tree was warm. A low vibration hummed beneath the surface, like a voice too deep to be heard. I pulled my hand back and took a shaky breath. That's when I saw the stream again. Or maybe a different one. I don't know. It curved out from behind a knotted root system and moved slowly, far too slowly. The water was clear, but it didn't reflect anything. I knelt down to look closer. It didn't reflect me. I leaned over further. The stream wasn't showing the sky above. It showed stars. A night sky full, bright, detailed. But the sun still sat behind the mist here. I blinked. The stars didn't go away. Somewhere deep in my chest, something pulled. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something older than both. It told me, keep going. So I did. I followed the stream upstream, letting it lead me into the trees. As I walked, the temperature changed. Not gradually. Instantly. Cold then warm. Still then windless. Each step like crossing into a new room, though the forest looked unchanged. Then I saw something ahead, a shape. Not moving, but not still. Angular. Low to the ground. It was stone. The arch again. But not the one I had entered. This one was cracked. Half collapsed. Like it had been broken long ago. Covered in ivy. Smothered by roots. But the shape was unmistakable. Another gate. Only this one was sealed. I stepped closer and noticed something scratched across its face. Symbols, yes, but words, too. English, barely legible under the moss. This one closed behind us. Us. Not him. Not her. Us. I turned to look behind me, but the stream had vanished. There was only forest. I checked my compass. The needle spun slowly. No direction. I sat down, took out my notebook, tried to sketch what I saw, the arch, the symbols, the trees. But my hand shook. The lines came out wrong, bent, off angle, as if something in this place rejected being recorded. And still, in the back of my mind, the pulse, like something beneath the ground was waiting, not buried, sleeping, watching me breathe. I closed the notebook and stood. No sound again, just that same stillness. But now, it felt more personal. The forest knew I was here, and I was starting to wonder if it had always known. I don't know how long I wandered after that. Time wasn't passing the way it should. The light in the sky never shifted. The air never warmed or cooled. I checked my watch once. It was dead. Not just blank. Frozen. The second hand trembled in place like it wanted to move, but couldn't remember how. Eventually, the forest began to change. The trees grew farther apart. The moss underfoot grew thicker. Then the ground turned to stone, cracked, uneven, cold. And ahead of me, tucked beneath a sharp ridge of rock, I saw an opening. A hole in the hillside, framed in carved stone, perfectly square. I didn't decide to enter. I was already inside. The tunnel was narrower than the first. I had to duck to walk. My backpack scraped the ceiling. The walls were close, and for the first few steps, I could hear the sound of my own breathing echo back at me. But that stopped quickly. Soon, the tunnel absorbed even that. My breath became silent. My steps vanished. Only the faint flicker of my flashlight remained. The beam seemed weaker than it should have been, barely stretching more than a few feet ahead. Symbols lined the walls again. These were sharper, more detailed, deeper, as if they'd been carved with something sharper than tools. Some looked like letters from ancient alphabets, others like scratch marks. One symbol repeated again and again. A circle, split down the middle. It was burned into stone, etched into metal, scrawled in dark residue I didn't want to examine too closely. And then I saw the handprints. Not drawn, pressed into stone, as if someone had leaned against the wall and melted into it. Full palms, fingers, some small, like children, others long, wrong, curved. I moved past them quickly. The passage widened into a chamber, a dome of stone and earth. At its center, a pedestal, floating, literally floating, 3 feet above the floor. It spun slowly. No sound, no source. I stepped closer. The object on the pedestal wasn't glowing, but it hummed. I felt it in my teeth, in my ribs, like it was vibrating inside my bones, not in the air. It was a sphere, black, smooth, imperfect, and as I stared into it, I saw something moving beneath its surface. Shapes, faces, fragments of things I'd never seen, and one thing I had. My own reflection. But not from now. Not from this place. I reached out. My fingers stopped an inch away. I wasn't going to touch it. I knew better. But then the surface of the sphere rippled and leaned toward me. That was enough. I turned and walked, fast. The tunnel didn't feel the same on the way out. It was tighter, colder. The walls leaned in. I moved quickly, but carefully, watching my footing. That was when I realized. My footsteps were no longer alone. Something behind me. Soft. Just once every few steps. Not matching me. Not rushing. Just following. Casually. Confidently. I didn't look back. I emerged into the forest again, gasping like I'd been underwater. The sky hadn't changed. The light hadn't changed. But the feeling had. The forest felt aware now. Like I had triggered something. The pulse beneath the ground was stronger. The symbols on the trees glowed faintly. Not bright. Just enough to say, "We see you now." I stood there, trying to remember why I came. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was obligation. Something in this place was unfinished. And I had already crossed the line. I kept walking, because standing still felt like an invitation I couldn't afford to send. The trees weren't just trees anymore. Their shapes had changed. Taller, narrower. Some bent toward me in unnatural ways, like they were stretching just slightly to see me better. And the silence, it wasn't empty now. It was filled with something too quiet to hear. I came to a clearing I didn't remember passing before. It was perfectly circular. Dead center, a small stone altar, no more than waist high, covered in moss, carved with the same split circle symbol. I didn't want to go near it, but my body moved anyway. When I reached it, I noticed the air was vibrating again. Low, slow, like a drum being struck in another dimension. I leaned forward and saw what was carved into the center of the stone. A map. Not a full one. Just a fragment. Like a corner torn from a larger whole. And at its center, a mark. Not the same one from my parchment. This one was smaller, but somehow deeper. As I looked at it, something inside me shifted. Like a lock turning. Not just in my mind, in memory. I wasn't alone anymore. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. And that's when I saw them. Flickering figures. Transparent, but full of shape. Men, women, children, dozens of them. Standing in the trees, half-formed, like smoke caught in form. Their mouths moved in silence. And all at once, the silence stopped being silent. A flood of whispers poured into my head, overlapping, impossible to decipher. Then one voice cut through it all, calm, clear, close. "You shouldn't have come alone." I opened my eyes. Everything was still. The forest, the altar, the air. But I knew something had changed. I'd been seen. Fully seen. Not just observed, but cataloged. Identified. And now the forest remembered me. Worse, it was sharing me. I turned and started moving again. My pace was faster. I was sweating, breathing hard. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I knew that staying in one place too long would let something catch up. Not something behind me. Something inside. That's when I reached the stream again. Or a different one. It was wider now. Darker. Moving in reverse. Not the water, the reflection. The surface mirrored the forest, but in the wrong direction. Every tree bent left when mine bent right. The sky above was black, full of stars I didn't recognize. And in the water, I saw myself, standing, still, but not matching my movements. My reflection didn't blink. Then it smiled. Not malicious, not cruel, just off, wrong, tilted, like a mask worn a little too loosely. I stepped back, and the smile faded. I walked on, avoiding the stream now, staying close to the roots and trunks. Minutes passed, or hours. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow, raspy, close. I turned slowly. There was nothing, but it was there. I could feel it. The way you can feel a spider on your skin before you ever see it. The way your body knows it's being watched, even if your mind denies it. And suddenly I knew the forest wasn't a place. It was a structure, a machine, a memory engine built from roots and rock and silence. And now, I was part of its storage. The trees opened into another clearing, not round this time. Jagged, torn from the landscape like something had exploded outward, rather than grown naturally. Rocks were shattered, trees were splintered at unnatural angles. And at the center, the gate. Not a tunnel, not an arch, a frame. 2 tall stone columns, maybe 10 feet high, carved with symbols too deep to be worn by weather. And between them, nothing. Not black, not shadow, nothing. It wasn't emptiness. It was absence. My skin went cold, but not from air, from memory. I'd seen this before, in a dream, or a story, or a thought I didn't have until just now. The gate didn't look like it belonged to this place. It looked like the forest had grown around it to contain it, and it wasn't closed. I stepped closer. The world around it shimmered like heat on pavement. The air bent. A low tone vibrated at the base of my skull, not a sound, but a frequency. It bypassed my ears and went straight into memory. The surface between the columns shifted. I saw a forest. Familiar, but wrong. The trees bent away from gravity. The light pulsed in slow heartbeats. The sky was copper, filled with stars that blinked in patterns I didn't understand. And there, just at the edge of that other forest, stood a figure. Me, standing still, staring back. Only it wasn't mirroring me. It didn't move when I did. It watched. Its face looked like mine, but its eyes didn't blink. And slowly, it raised one hand. I didn't move. I couldn't. The hand pointed behind me. I turned. There was nothing. But when I looked back at the gate, the figure was gone. And I wasn't alone. Something stood just to the right of the frame. Too tall, too thin, not human. A silhouette that flickered like bad footage, vibrating between frames. It didn't move, but I felt it see me. The gate hummed louder. The air thickened. The ground trembled slightly, like something beneath the soil had taken a breath. And that's when I understood. The gate wasn't a doorway. It was a memory, a place that remembered who opened it and what they were before they stepped through. It didn't lead somewhere else. It led to a version of here that had forgotten the rules. I stepped back. The humming faded. The gate dimmed. And I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I would be. Because the gate doesn't open for the curious. It opens for the changed. And something inside me had already begun to change. I left the gate behind. But it didn't leave me. As I walked, I felt it. A subtle pull, like a thread stitched into the center of my chest, tightening gently each time I stepped too far. Like it was reminding me, you saw me. That's enough. You belong to this now. The forest didn't return to normal. It shifted. The trees leaned in unnatural directions. Some curved toward the sky like claws. Others drooped as if mourning something I couldn't name. The moss was darker, wet to the touch, even though no water ran nearby. And then came the echoes. Footsteps, but never where I walked. Voices, too faint to understand, but loud enough to notice. And worst of all, the laughter. Children's laughter, soft and fragmented, like it had been cut from an old recording and looped unevenly. It never got closer, but it never went away. I started to see things in the corners of my vision. Flickers, shapes, a man with no mouth, a woman walking backwards, a child staring from the branches above me, eyes wide, never blinking. When I turned to look directly at them, they vanished. Every time. But each time they disappeared, they were a little closer the next time they came back. The forest became narrow. The trees on either side of the path leaned until they nearly touched above me, creating a tunnel of bark and shadow. I pressed on, breathing shallow, muscles tense. Then the path split. Not left and right, up and down. The trail beneath my feet simply forked, one half rising at a gentle incline, the other sinking downward into roots and shadow. And between them stood a figure. Not human. Not quite. It was made of branches and bark, twisted into a vaguely humanoid shape. It had no face, but something in my head filled it in for me. A face I didn't want to remember. A version of me, maybe, or someone I'd lost. It didn't move, but it blocked the downward path. So I went up. With every step, the light dimmed. Not because of trees, there was no sun anymore. The sky had become a dull sheet of static gray, like the color of dead TV snow. The higher I climbed, the more I felt like gravity had changed its mind. My limbs grew heavier. The trees leaned upside down. I reached the top of the path and found nothing, just an open field of grass that didn't sway. A place so quiet I could hear my thoughts slow down. And then a sound behind me. I turned, expecting the path I had just climbed. But it was gone. Instead, there was a door. Freestanding. Wood. Old. Closed. No frame. No walls. Just a door in the middle of nothing. I walked toward it, reached out, but before I could touch the knob, a whisper crawled through the field. Choose. I turned. The grass was full of shadows now. Moving. No shape. Just presence. Choose. The door creaked slightly. Not from wind. There was no wind. It was breathing. Waiting. I stepped back. And suddenly, I was standing in the forest again. No field. No door. No shadows. Just trees. Normal. Except, they were in the wrong places. I recognized some of them. The carvings. The moss patterns. But they weren't where they should be. The forest had rebuilt itself around me, backwards. Or maybe I had walked into a memory that wasn't mine. At first, I thought I was retracing my steps. The path looked familiar. The trees. The patterns. Even the smell, damp pine, cold stone, something metallic underneath. But then I saw the fire pit. I'd never made one. Rocks arranged in a circle. Ash. A rusted tin mug. A scorched page from a notebook half buried in the dirt. I knelt down and pulled it free. One corner was blackened, but I could still read the writing. It was mine. My handwriting. My journal. Notes I hadn't written yet. I flipped the page. Coordinates. Sketches. A diagram of the gate, but with differences. It was drawn open, and something was stepping through. A name was written beneath it, but it wasn't mine. It was scratched out. I looked up. The forest had shifted again. Trees that were behind me were now ahead. The trail bent without curving. I was being led, not by terrain, but by design. A test. No, a memory. And not mine. I kept walking, the notebook still in my hand. Then came the voices. Not whispers. Not echoes. Real voices. Layered. Some spoke in English. Others in languages I didn't recognize. Some were pleading. Others laughing. One voice repeated the same line over and over. We came in pieces. We left in parts. The air turned thick again. The ground pulsed beneath my boots like a heartbeat buried just below the surface. Then I saw the others. Dozens of them. Figures standing still in the forest, just far enough away that I couldn't see their faces. All silent. All facing me. Their heads turned, in perfect sync, as I passed. None moved. But I knew they were watching. Or maybe waiting. For me to remember. Because the truth was starting to form at the edges of my mind like frost. I'd been here before. Not in this life. Not with this name. But the forest knew me. It remembered the version of me that stepped through the gate long ago. The one who didn't come back. The one who still walked these woods in whispers and shadows and fragments of thought. And I wasn't the only one. The trees remembered us all. Every trespasser. Every explorer. Every soul who crossed the line between wonder and warning. Their memories hung in the branches like fruit that no one dared pick. And now mine was growing too. I came to a tree that had no bark, just carvings. Hundreds of names. Etched deep. Most were faded. Some were crossed out. One was mine, spelled exactly as I write it. And beneath it, returned unopened. I don't know how long I stood in front of that tree. Long enough for the forest to forget I was watching. Long enough for me to forget what I was supposed to be doing. I ran. Not with panic. With purpose. I needed to find the gate again. To see if it was still there. If it had always been there. The woods didn't fight me this time. No misdirection. No rearranged paths. Just a straight line between where I was and where I was meant to go. The gate stood in the clearing exactly as I'd left it. But it was open now. Truly open. Between the two columns was no longer absence. It was a corridor. A corridor of trees, arching overhead like a tunnel, but not part of this forest. The light inside was pale gold. The air shimmered. It looked beautiful, But I didn't trust beauty anymore. I stepped closer. The same hum, stronger now. The same pull, deeper. And at the threshold, just before the shimmering light began, I saw myself. Again. But this time older. Tired. Not sad, just finished. He looked at me like he knew everything that was going to happen next. And he didn't try to stop me. He just said, "You can go, but you can't come back. And if you stay, you'll never know which version of you walked away." I didn't respond, because there was no right answer. Only motion. So I stepped forward. And the forest closed behind me. No sound. No collapse. Just the absence of presence. Inside the corridor, the air was warmer. Lighter. And for the first time since this began, I felt calm. I walked. And behind me, the gate remembered me one final time. Then it forgot. And so did I.